Thank you for previewing BimlExpress 2025. Let's take a quick tour. First, to get things installed, select the Extensions item from your left nav, and eventually you'll be able to find BimlExpress in the VS Code Marketplace. But for now, while we're still in limited preview, click the menu item and select Install from v6. Once you select the v6 that you've downloaded from the preview URL, the installation will proceed without further prompting. Once the installation is complete, you'll notice that you have a new BimlExpress item in your left nav, which gives you the main navigation points for your BimlExpress experience. You'll have to be sure to enter a product key. You can use the same BimlExpress key that you've used in previous versions, or you can click to request a new product key. Once you've done that, you can basically close this window because it's no longer going to be needed for Biml development. When I go to my File Explorer, any Biml files we have will now have a Biml logo, and they will appear in our Biml menu item when we return to it in a moment. I can go to any of these and open them up, and you'll see right off the bat that we get code colorization. But beyond that, we also get full IntelliSense. So hover over, we get quick info, and on top of the quick info within the XML bits, which we have had in the past, you also now get full IntelliSense on the .NET bits. That, of course, isn't as interesting, but we get not only our quick info, but we get our code completion. So a more interesting example would be, for example, hovering over and seeing the different methods and properties that are available as you're coding. As you explore this, you'll find that we have done a lot of work to make sure that the editing experience is very smooth. So, for example, as I'm coding here, let the IntelliSense do as much work as possible for me. That's going to be my strategy. So I hit space, I can choose name, type in a name, space again, and then for anything where you might have more interesting items where there are enum selections, for example, all of those are going to be available in drop-downs for me as well. So I could say, for example, here, compression type, and select, and you'll see how quickly these things allow me to do auto-completion. Just hit space and hit the next property and keep going. So the coding experience should be a lot better than it ever has been in Biml before. And when I'm ready to do my build, I can then go ahead and say build either here, or I can build from up here, or I can build from a right click in the File Explorer view. Now, an important thing about builds is that by default, the live Biml files are going to control which files are built. So if I have a couple of entry point files, and then the rest of them are all incorporated via include directives or call Biml script, I would not include those as live. Being live is like in the old version, having files selected when you do your right click and expand Biml. So in this case, I have a tier 1, which will create 10 separate tables, and then I additionally have a tier 2, which will create packages off of each of those tables. And for example, if I were to have both of those in play and do a build, I'm going to get 10 separate packages. We'll see down here, BimlExpress is building my code, and the build failed. If I take a look, we'll see the required attribute connection name is missing. All of this works, so this was on purpose to give you a view of how this navigation works. I clean up that issue with the incomplete database that I added, do another build, and this time we succeeded. So once I've succeeded, if I go back here, we'll see that now I have an output folder that I didn't have before, which has all of my packages laid out for me. If I go into my settings, we'll see how that output directory was selected. So in settings, within BimlExpress, we now have target folders for all of our supported target platforms, which now include Azure Data Factory, Analysis Services Multidimensional, Analysis Services Tabular, and Integration Services, including all version flavors back to 2005. We also have the features that you may already be familiar with from the old BimlExpress. We're using existing connection manager GUIDs so that we don't overwrite GUIDs that are already in play for files that you might have manually created or created in previous automation runs. Once we have our build working, we might also want to explore imports. Imports work exactly as they did before. You can choose a DT proj from the file system or individual DT SSIS files. And I'll just go ahead and choose the one that we just built just to show how this works. I'll grab just this table 0 and open it. I have the DT proj file for this. And once I do my import, we get a file here that has the equivalent Biml file for what we just imported. Now, obviously, you don't want to have to do that as a round trip to see what your flat Biml is for in a script file. What we can do instead is click on this preview button. So here, if I say Open Biml Preview, what it will show me is all of the packages for this Tier 2 file. Now, I had mentioned the live Biml files being very important earlier. If I deselect Tier 1, so that we're not creating those tables that are being iterated over to create these packages, and now do another expansion. It's trying to save that. Let me go ahead and close it. And now do another expansion. Now I get an empty packages list because there are no tables to iterate over because this Tier 1 file is not live. Of course, I could save that if I wanted to retain it. In addition to the IntelliSense on our Biml and on our C# code, we also have IntelliSense in our directive code, which tells all of the different options that you have and descriptions of the various attributes. And in addition to that, we also have support for VB IntelliSense. So if I go in here now and say foo dot, here we have .NET IntelliSense on our VB code nuggets. If we want to avoid having to set our live Biml files for any particular build, I can still do the multi-select and right-click and build Biml from the file list, just like I did in the old BimlExpress. Except for most of our customers, we find that they have a standard list of live files that they want to use. And this new workflow is going to give them significantly more flexibility in workflow and predictability in workflow where they can set these and they get persisted across runs. You'll note that we still do have the validate Biml option as well, if you want to validate instead of building, and that won't commit anything to the file system. And in general, you'll find that Azure Data Factory and analysis services is relatively straightforward to use. So for Data Factory, for example, you'll start with Data Factories. And we have documentation for this on the website, everything that's available. But for most people getting started, the best way is to just start writing some code and see what is available in your autocomplete. That should be enough of an introduction to get started with this new approach. Hopefully you'll enjoy the new approach that we have in VS Code. This is going to be the long-term way forward. While the new architecture we have, which has been built from the ground up on top of Language Server Protocol, can be extended to Visual Studio as well. We feel especially with the multi-targeting capability for Azure Data Factory, analysis services, and in the future other platforms as well, it is going to be difficult to keep ourselves limited to the Visual Studio SQL Server Integration Services project system, which was already limited just for integration services projects. And now that we go far beyond that, it really starts to hit a wall where it becomes a problem for user experience. Please give this a try. Let us know how it works. We're very open to receiving feedback and making any corrections before a general release as soon as we are comfortable that the community agrees that this is stable and ready to go. Thanks.